I'm hoping we're cutting through and getting to something real. Okay? I'm hoping that we're cutting through. Whoops, I dropped the pen. Oh well. Hoping we're cutting through to something real. Okay? And I'm hoping that in doing so, the body will actually start to grow up in a profound way so that we can really have some unity. Because unity will be the natural outflow of our growing up. So again, unity comes naturally when all the divisive issues are removed and cleaned up. But otherwise, it's a completely unnatural thing for us. It's an unnatural state. That's why you see Israel struggle with it so much. The natural state in a fleshly person, a fleshly being, is to, in their selfishness, look, if you need things your way, and you need things your way, and you need things your way, and you need things your way, how many of you are all going to be on the same page with everything? Not going to happen. So there's disunity, there's your division. And division simply means more than one vision for how to do, what to accomplish, where you're going, what should happen. That's division. And that's why there has to be leadership that's respected. And leadership needs to be growing to the point where they have proven that they should be respected. In other words, that they are actually worthy of respect because of their caring for the flock, etc. It has to be earned. Okay, salvation is not earned. Reward is earned. Go back and listen to the Are You Saved teaching. But everything in Scripture, there's an element of earning except salvation. He made that available to everyone free of charge, but not everyone gets it. Gets the taste of it and embrace it if they don't do the doing. They've got to prove. That's the only difference between those who get in and those that don't. All of them were offered salvation. Yeshua died once for all. All. Everyone. Everyone ever lived before he died, even after he died, and when he died. It doesn't matter. Go listen to that teaching if you're confused.
This is in John 15:12. It reminds me of everything you've said today. It says, "This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, that one should lay down his life for his friends." Doesn't sound like what you really want to do.
No. See, but we think about, and I've mentioned this verse during the Unity Division teaching before, I've mentioned it in other teachings. It's a very powerful verse, but see, here's the thing. You might think, well, you're my brother, I'd take a bullet for you. But the calendar, nope, not laying that down. The nature of the Godhead, not laying. See, we think we would lay our life down for somebody because you're my brother, but you can't lay down your pet doctrinal, you can't, you understand what I'm saying? We think we would do the one, but the easier thing we wouldn't do. It's unbelievable. In other words, if I was let's go back to World War II. If I was a Nazi, and as a Jew, I'm not saying if I as a Jew, you knew me, and the Nazis were around, and the Nazis asked you where I was, or they would threaten you, you believe you would lay down your life for your brother, and you would be willing to take that and protect your brother. But what if you and I don't agree on the calendar, or one of those other things we fight about? Would you lay that down? Oh, no. You'll die for that too before you'd work something out with your brother rather than have division. See, but we don't want to lay down those things that we're emotionally bound to. Okay, we emotionally invested in. Well, I can't let that go. I've invested a lot of emotion in that, a lot of my effort and my time. I've studied it out for hours and hours and hours. I've beat a bunch of people up about it. If I laid it down now, what would that say about all that? That you're growing up? That's what it might say.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. To me, a big issue about leaving a particular denomination is because of their doctrines. I found myself, as I progressed in truth and knowledge of God's law and the way Yah wants me to live, is because they had doctrines that did not line up with what he says. So I want unity. Now, my statement, though, what I'm thinking, though, is would you please tell me, would you consider the issue of unity in this Ezekiel 20:34 through 38? It says, bring them into the bond of the covenant. Do you think that's a way that Yah wants us to bring in, be in unity?
I'm not familiar off the top of my head which of those verses are.
It says the bond of the covenant.
Right. Well, the context again has to be when you're going out here. It's Ezekiel's being instructed to go say to the house of Israel, "Thus said the Master Yahweh," and so he's working with people that should know. So there's some times when there's instruction going on that's for people that should know. And by the way, we have to be careful who we think are people that should know. It was more obvious then because this was Israel. And as a nation, that cohesive, living together nation should know. And Ezekiel was sent to tell them, hey, you guys, you're the quote-unquote chosen people. You were called out, a called-out assembly. You should know better. And so he sent them to do that and deal with it from that point of view. So what Ezekiel's being asked to deal with in chapter 20 doesn't necessarily apply to everybody out there, but it may apply to me talking to you, a teacher talking to those in the body, trying to remind them of the covenant they're supposed to be drawn to. So hopefully that answers the question from that point of view. Okay? You got to be careful who's speaking, who the audience is, and what the context is, and then who we apply it to today as a type and shadow, because it's not necessarily, wow, it's getting loud. It's not necessarily applies across the board to every situation. So what I mean by that is this. Let's say we have friends that are in a church or another denomination. It's not for us to draw them out of that. Abba has to draw them out of that. Okay? It's not for us to draw them out of that. You're to be available if he draws them out of it to you, to help them if they're drawn to you. But you don't go over there with a big hook and try to hook them and drag them out. Okay? You just be ready and available. That's why you need to study the teachings, study the word, so you can do the 4 things I've talked about. Number 1, you understand the material. Number 2, you're doing the material. Number 3, you can defend what you're doing. And then 4, you can teach others to do it. That's the purpose of the way I teach, is so that you can understand it, do it, defend it, and teach it. Why? Because at some point, we're hoping Abba will draw some people to you. And when he does, you can share and defend what you're doing.
My question, which I know you get a lot on live stream, you are concerned with our halakha, which is tremendous, and I thank you very much for that. But people have posed questions. We would like to learn historically different things that happened, and you would say that's not what Abba wants you to be teaching us. How do you go about finding another teacher that sort of gets you into the history and walking you through Old Jerusalem?
Well, first and foremost, if somebody is your teacher, like in this case, I am your teacher, you can ask me, and I might have teachers that I can recommend that cover certain material, certain areas of study that I don't teach very much about, okay? And so what Becky was saying is that I've often told you I've not been called to teach about the breakdowns and nuances of temple service or all of the symbolisms of certain things historically that the Israelites went and did and whatever. I've been called really to teach you what to do, why to do it, with what heart to have when you're doing it, so that you are doing what's pleasing in his sight. Okay? Now, if it's an area that I don't know somebody I can recommend, then what I would tell you to do is go around looking for some, and then you can bring that to me and I can kind of vet it out a little bit for you. Okay? Just to give you an opinion. I'm not here to tell you what you can and can't listen to. But if you're looking for my opinion, I'd be happy to share with you But just be careful that you don't end up unstable and going to and fro because you happen to find a very good, dynamic teacher. Hey, look, some of you love the way I teach, the style. Some of you don't. Some of you really would like a teacher who has a nice, soft voice and kind of smiles a whole lot more. And there's guys out there, and they're dynamic enough and interesting enough that you may prefer that style. Next thing you know, that's your new teacher. Now, maybe that is supposed to be your teacher, but if I'm supposed to be careful that you don't let the charisma or the comfort you feel with a teacher draw you to that teacher. Let it be the teachings, the actual information that you're drawn to. Be careful of being attracted to style over substance. I'm not saying there aren't any other good teachers out there. There are lots of teachers out there, and I'm wishing there were more. But just understand, if Abba's drawing you to a teacher, because some people out there, I'm not their teacher, I'm a teacher. Good. Don't let that disturb your relationship with your teacher. Okay? But if you come to me for vetting purposes, I can help you vet some teachers out and that can maybe help, avoid some pitfalls. I'm happy to do that.
How do we interpret? It says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Some trials are really big. They're really life-threatening. Some trials are kind of medium and might be life-threatening or might cause maiming or something that would really change your life. And other trials are like spilt milk. And how do we interpret? I think the big trials, we all sort of, we say, okay, Father wants me to get serious and get close to him and really seek him. But when you're in a place of repentance and seeking him and really kind of having an upswing in your halakha, and you're really sensitive to everything, and these minor trials come along. Like I got up early in the morning, I was kind of groggy, and I took the car to go get gas, and I wasn't quite awake yet, and I scraped and made big dents in both doors on my driver's side, and I found out it's going to cost me $1,000 to fix it, and I don't have $1,000. So every time I look at that thing, I go, what were you trying to tell me? I passed the test of praising him. Thank Yah for that. I passed the test of not worrying about it. But what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me when I drop a bottle of milk on the floor and it smashes in a million pieces and everything is wasted? Do I interpret that, okay, milk is nourishment and I must not be nourishing my brothers and sisters in the body enough, or my joints hurt and they have been hurting a long time. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
All right. Not everything that happens is a trial. First of all, a lot of things are just time and chance. So don't try to interpret everything as being what that I'm supposed to. Sometimes things just happen. And it's just an opportunity to have a good attitude, okay? Like if you drop something off the counter and spill the milk or break the glass or something like that. Now, the more expensive, bigger things, like the lesson of, if I do something without my full awake attention, it may cost me. That's something you can learn out of the trial with the car, because you know why that happened. Sometimes I happen to just turn a corner too quickly and my elbow will catch something on a counter, knock it over and break it. All right? Then I got to learn. I need to be, what are my lessons? I'm not paying enough attention to everything around me. Not a big deal. Not deep interpretation. Just in life, things happen. If you know why it happened, look for the simple pashat. Okay? Now, sometimes you break something or drop something just because you're getting older and you may have some issues with your motor skills and it just drops. Nothing to learn there, just accepting I'm getting older and I have to accept that that's my new part in life. But sometimes it's something because of me, or because, when I'm looking at me, I do tend to get focused, which means that I'm not focused enough. I'm laser focused. And while I'm laser focused, moving and going, I may knock something over or bang into something or someone, and not being even aware that I'm doing it. And so then that trial is to say, hey, it's good to be focused, but don't be so focused that you forget what's going on around you. Okay, so let's not try to overly analyze, like, is this trying to tell me something about how I'm behaving in the body or something? It's not always like when Jeremiah was told, Jeremiah, go over there, look at that pot. Okay, now let's get the giant metaphor out of the pot that you see, right? Sometimes in life it's more simple. He's trying to just wake you up that your behavior has gotten either careless or over-focused or not focused or something like that. So I would say, like when you scraped your car, you knew that you weren't quite awake, and that tells you, you know what, in life, if I do things when I'm not really awake enough for it, something may cost me. And so that's not just about the car. It could be anything in life. If I'm going to approach something that I'm not really focused and awake and in the right mindset for, it may not end up the way I wanted it to end up. It could go south.
Okay, in response to that, how do we interpret understanding that Yahweh is absolutely sovereign? He allows everything or causes everything, and that he knows even when a sparrow falls. You know, it's difficult sometimes to know, where do I draw the line? How do I know if he's talking to me or if he's not?
Well, and that's a great question. Well, first of all, let's not forget that Solomon, the wisest man, said time and chance happens to everybody. And Abba allows time and chance to happen. And sometimes time and chance he allows it to happen because it's going to be a big thing. And sometimes it's just, well, you broke something. And he just want to see if it's going to be, are you able to praise him? Are you going to lose your temper? Sometimes it's small things. I mean, I know, for example, for me, that when I go to log into something, because I had to clean out my cache or something on my computer, so I now have to re-log into everything, that he's going to allow it not to work, even though I did it right, a certain amount of times, because I have such a terrible patience problem, and I will lose my temper, and he's going to keep allowing that to happen until I don't lose my temper, okay? And so he'll use that situation. Now, on the other hand, when the question of how do you know, that's why you have leadership that you can counsel with and say, this happened. Do you think there was something bigger maybe I was supposed to see? And then through the counseling and discussion about when it happened, what else was going on in your life at the time, and etc., we could maybe come to an interpretation, like going to Joseph for an interpretation of a dream, okay, or Daniel to interpret a dream, right? So you have people that you should go to and say, this just happened. I don't want to overreact, but I don't want to underreact. Do you think it's something that, is he trying to tell me something? Now, don't come to me when you knock over the milk container and spill the milk, okay? But if you've done it like 17 times in the same week, you might want to talk to me. Maybe there's something happening, okay? But that's why he gives us leadership that you should go to for counsel. See, the problem is it's not enough of a default yet in our system. When things happen that I don't know what to do with, I'm supposed to go get counsel. But we'll talk to our friends about it. We'll try to handle it ourselves, but you're supposed to go get counsel. Don't be afraid to do that. Let the counselor tell you, this is something that you really don't need to bring to me. Okay? Not like in a harsh way going, why'd you bring this to me? But I mean like, hey, I appreciate that you brought it, but when you get more things like this one is not on that level. This one, just interpret it as time and chance. Let it be something that you work on. He allows it at the very minimum to see where your attitude is at. Do you maintain the fruit of Galatians 5:22? If you've done that, you may have already accomplished all you needed to, okay, in that trial. As he allowed things to happen, time and chance is allowed to happen to test and see where your maturity is in your attitude, at the very minimum. Every trial has that aspect to it. Some of them have more, some of them don't.
I was thinking kind of on the same lines, like when I went to the doctor recently, they found something else was wrong. And then they also found something else was wrong. And so it was kind of like if I hadn't gone to the doctor, they wouldn't have found that, and they wouldn't have found the other thing. And it's like my girlfriend had an accident, and she was hurting, and so she said, well, maybe I should just go anyway to the ER. So I took her over there, and she had an x-ray, and it wasn't where she had hurt her wrist, but when they took an x-ray, they noticed her bone had broken, and it was not even the area that was hurting her. So it's kind of like sometimes things happen to show us other things that maybe we wouldn't get taken care of.
Absolutely, okay? But again, if you get to a point where something has happened, especially if it's not one of those little easy ones, easy ones meaning you didn't love it, You maybe got frustrated or lost your temper about it, but it was like a little dumb thing, like not being able to log into your computer. Okay, you don't need to go get counsel about that. Although I think at this point I probably do need counsel about it because it still bothers me too much. But I need different counseling. How do I deal with my frustration? But I mean, if you're not sure how to interpret, then you may need to get counsel. Say, hey, listen, I don't know. Maybe this is nothing, but this is what I went through. Do you think Abba's trying to tell me something? And then we could talk about it. I don't claim any special gift in that area, but I generally do reasonably well in walking through with the person through what they're going through, and a lot of times they figure out what it was they were supposed to get out of it through that discussion, okay?
Can you explain how letting go of your desires should bring us, or should not bring us stress, but joy?
No. Okay, next question. I had to do that to somebody at some point. I figured Steve could take it because I know Steve. All I can explain is this. The Galatians 5, fruit of the Spirit, for it to be the fruit of the Spirit and not just what we can naturally, easy for me to say, naturally accomplish, is in those situations where our default would be to be stressed. I mean, how can you count it joy in a trial? You can't, not in the flesh. It has to be in the Spirit. You have to allow Him to bring that ability out. Okay, so Stephen, the answer is this. Our default is stress. To have joy and peace and patience and all that other stuff is not in us without the Spirit. But the Spirit doesn't just like a magic wand come in you and all of a sudden you're going to have all those things. You must submit to the Spirit. You must seek as soon as it happens, you go, okay, my flesh wants to go nuts right now. Father, I'm going to seek your Spirit to show me how to have joy in this moment. Because I'm ready to just, woo, you know.
From Nate Taylor asked a question, and I've gotten asked this before, but the verse in Isaiah 58 where it talks about Shabbats is on the surface about Yom Kippur. And I've had people claim, well, I can go to the beach or I can ride my bike because that verse is about Yom Kippur, not about Shabbat. And I personally think that you had answered a lot about that question when you were talking about the tithing and about how, we can apply that to every Shabbat. So
Right.
Applying that to Shabbats won't get us into trouble. I guess he wants your answer.
Okay, and so Nate, if you're dealing with something and it, first thing you want to do is figure out if your beard is itchy. So if your beard is itching, then you take out your coin and you scratch it. Nate and I have this thing going back and forth with the scratching the beard. No, seriously, Marty's going to be like, now how am I supposed to put that in the afterburn? Okay, Marty, cut. Now I'm going to answer Nate's question. Okay, so Nate, Isaiah 58 is exactly, kind of like what you were saying there when Craig was reading it, in that we must look at it beyond trying to limit it. Yes, that chapter can be possibly focusing on Yom Kippur. But what he's talking about there is Shabbat. Okay, so at the minimum now it's telling you that high days are Shabbats. So you can take it back the other way, extrapolating it back the other way. But in Isaiah 58, again, there's so many things that we do today that are extrapolations because, we look at things and we say, okay, what is this talking about going forward and how do I apply that in my life? Okay? Now, I want to just go back here and see, because it doesn't overtly make it clear that this is talking about Yom Kippur, but, I'm going to go through the whole day. Let's see. They say we have fasted and you have not seen, and we have afflicted our beings, and you have not taken note. Look in the day of our fasting, and you find pleasure, and all your labor, etc. So this is where they're that's in verse 3, 4, 5 of chapter 58. But you know what? You got to remember, though, for those that are reading this through a non-Jewish mind, you forget that there were many fastings by this point that the Jewish community was doing, okay, that the Israelite community was doing. There were not just the one for Yom Kippur. And so they're saying here, look, we do these fastings and we do these other things and we're not feeling like you're paying attention to us. We're not getting your attention. And so that doesn't in itself say, okay, that what's going on here by the time we get to verse 13 and 14, that we're talking about Yom Kippur. Because then it goes, it talks about sharing bread with the hungry, and you bring the house of the poor, and you cast out, and you do all these other things. Wait a minute. You're not doing bread to the hungry on Yom Kippur. I mean, I'm just saying it's too easy to use that as an excuse to do things on Shabbat you shouldn't do. Now, let's use the measuring stick that I gave you in the teaching and in other teachings, which is, if I didn't have to do this on Shabbat, if I didn't have to be this strict, but I was this strict, is that going to get me in trouble? No. But if I was supposed to be this strict and I didn't, would it get me in trouble? Yes. Remember, we also have Yeshua saying to the servant who only did because he tried to figure, and this is, by the way, it doesn't say this, but I believe it's there, the servant who tried to make sure he knew exactly the minimum exact requirements expected, to that servant who only did exactly what was asked, you worthless servant. He wants us to take what's here and do more, not less. And these are all people approaching excuses to do less. They're looking for excuses to do less. But also the key in all of this is the emphasis in verse 13. It says, if you do turn back your foot from the Sabbath day, from doing your pleasure on my set-apart day, I shall call the Sabbath a delight, a set-apart day, esteemed and shall esteem it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. How is that limited to Yom Kippur? He says Sabbath there. He's talking about Shabbat, Sabbath. But he also is talking about the high days, all of those things, turning away your foot from doing your pleasure. You can only do his pleasure. He says, not even your own words. Don't even speak your own words. That's why I warn people. I say, look, during the oneg, during the rest of the day, don't talk about, the sports event that you saw the other day, or the teams that are playing, or the movie you just saw, or the book you just read, or some other thing, weird, whatever thing's happening at work, at the office, or whatever. Maybe some hobby you're into. Maybe you're doing gardening or stamp collecting or something. That's not for Shabbat. It's just not for Shabbat. Now, if you know somebody has an issue at work that they told you about, and you want to ask them, hey, did that issue work out? You're only looking for a yes or no. If it's no, then you say, great, tell me about it later, and we can pray about it after Shabbat. If it's yes, you just praise Abba. Hey, it got resolved. If it's no, that's not an opening now to spend the next hour explaining how it didn't work out. Because now you're not talking and focusing on him. Is this making any sense?
Is discernment supposed to be thrown out when we're vetting teachers, or when we're being submissive to teachers or those that we've given authority to?
No. Never throw out discernment. But part of the discernment is trying to discern whether the problem is you or the problem is what the teacher said. Remember, it's your desires that are filtering. So you have to make sure before your discernment is to help you figure out whether or not you're using filters or not. Am I having an issue with this teacher because of something I'm filtering it through? Because it's my preference, I like, I don't like, my background, my culture, the denomination I came out of, whatever filter you're filtering with. Or am I really using enough discernment to pull the filters out of the way to go, I really do have a problem with what this guy is saying, and I may need to go somewhere else. But realize that discernment, if it then gives you that response of, I probably don't really need to be here anymore, then you just get up and go. You don't try to bring anybody with you. Because that discernment was for you. Oh, but I got to warn everybody. Well, what if you're wrong? Or what if Abba was just giving you the discernment so that you needed to go on a different journey than they do? Maybe you're not ready for that teacher. And then the question will be, will you be humble enough to come back when you are ready? Or will you be too embarrassed to come back? Because I can promise you there's a good number of people out there that will not come back, that should and would want to, but are embarrassed. And if they're listening and watching, I would say, don't be embarrassed. Just come back. There's no reason to be worried about the shame of coming back and saying, I'm sorry, Rabbi, I was wrong. It's okay. There's nothing shameful in that. As a matter of fact, it's praiseworthy. So no, you never, ever, ever give up on discernment. However, you need to filter that. Well, not filter. You need to put a double check on that. I don't mean like a check in your spirit. I mean, you need to just say, okay, I just discerned something, but what was the source of that? Was I discerning it because it triggered one of my filters? It triggered some of my self-sovereignty? Or because it really was up from above and the Father wanted me to see something that I need to see so I can make better choices about this leadership? So no, never ever think you don't need discernment. You always need discernment. By the way, discernment, look at David, King David, okay, David HaMelech. In his discernment, he knew Saul was the anointed appointed, but he also knew if I don't leave, he's going to kill me. So he left, but he didn't try to take anybody with him. He didn't try to attack him. He didn't try to badmouth him and smear his name. He left. Now, sure, some people went with him, but that's because they chose to. He did not split the camp. No, he could have. His son tried to do that when his son didn't like what was going on, when his son wanted to take over, right? He split the camp. And that was the wrong way to approach it. So yeah, you know, your leader could go south. That's what happened with Saul. Saul was great until he wasn't great. And so what did David do? With discernment, he left. So always have a radar out there of discernment. While you're trusting, while you're submitting, but always be open to things can change. Look, the cloud moved from time to time.
Christians often quote James 1 as for them. However, I often tell them that it's not talking about you, much like the entirety of the New Testament, unless you are Hebrew or trying to be. What's MTOI think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much what I said at the beginning of the teaching, that he's addressing Israel. And Israel is today defined as those that are submissive to the commandments and have the testimony of Yeshua. This is Revelation 12:17. Okay? Those who with the testimony and those who keep the commandments, who have the word. So if you're one of those people, I don't care if you were born Jewish or not, if you're born Gentile, it doesn't matter. You've grafted in at the very minimum. That's who he's talking to. He's not talking to you if you're a Christian who's eating pork, keeping Sunday, Christmas, and Easter. He is not talking to you. He's talking, we'll call it the body. He could have addressed that to the body of Messiah. The problem is, if he said it that way, every Christian would believe it's talking about them. So he said to the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? Because that's what the body is made up of, the 12 tribes of Israel and those that would join themselves to them. It is not made up of the church.
Is Yaakov 1:15, or referring to Yaakov 1:15, is this physical death or spiritual death?
I don't even know how to answer this whole spiritual death thing. I mean, that seems like that's more like Christianese. Okay, that's like, to me, that's Christianese. Okay? What you do physically and in your interaction with the spiritual will either lead to life or death physically. Okay? It's Christians that want to separate the two. Okay? What you do in terms of your flesh or in terms of the spirit will either lead to life or death physically. Hopefully that answers the question. All right? So James 1 is talking about that it will lead to death. Okay, let me just find the verse and let me read it to you again. Give me 1 second. Sin, okay, when desire is conceived and gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has accomplished, it brings forth death. What is sin trying to do? Entrap you. If you're trapped in habitual sin, unrepented sin. Now, of course, Yaakov has an understanding that there would be, and we're going to get to this further on in the chapter when he talks about looking into the perfect Torah and seeing what's going on and looking in that mirror and then seeing and recognizing through the trials at the beginning of the chapter that you would then make teshuvah. You would repent. But he says if sin accomplishes, what is the point of sin? To bring about death. So if sin is habitual and you do nothing about it, it will accomplish what it's designed to accomplish, which is death. This whole spiritual death, thing, it's like saying spiritual Israel, it's Christianese. It means nothing. It's made up. Okay? We are concerned with this physical life leading into an eternal life. If we end up with death, it's not an eternal death. It's a death that there's no coming back from. It's a death that lasts forever, not an eternal punishing. The punishment is permanent. So what we're worried about is life and death as we think of it as human beings. Okay, we want to live forever. Well, that's going to be a physical living forever. Aren't you looking forward to living physically, being alive forever? It's not going to be a spiritual, some sort of spiritual forever. You're literally going to be alive. Now, you're not going to be dealing with a flesh suit anymore, but you are going to be physically, whatever the physics are of that kind of essence, alive. It won't be some, ethereal, esoteric idea of being spiritually alive. You will actually be alive. And so dead is dead and alive is alive. Man, that was profound, huh? Sin brings death. Faith brings life. Trust, belief, honoring the Father, obeying His word brings life. It's not real complicated. Abba's very black and white, very simple. Sin, death. There's only two. It's a choice. It's a very simple choice. Not like 17 choices. There's do what He says, life. Don't do what He says, death. That was complicated.